Hello and welcome to the new season of the Drawn and Redrawn, the Making of India's Internal Boundaries podcast. This is a part of a larger India State Stories project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is an undertaking by the Centre for Legislative Education and Research at Flame University in Pune. In this new season, we embark on a journey through the fascinating histories and narratives of each Indian state and union territories, exploring the pivotal events, influential personalities, and societal transformations that have shaped the subcontinent. In the 30th episode, we look at the long history behind the formation of Telangana state. This episode is based on a corresponding article written by our team at India State Stories. These articles have been converted to audio conversations with the help of Google's Notebook LM. You can find the relevant article link in the show notes. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
Today, we are opening up a map of India, but I want you to imagine erasing the lines you see today. We are rewinding the clock to 1947, and we are looking at this massive patch of the Deccan Plateau that, well, it arguably holds one of the most complex, dramatic, and violently contested political histories in the entire subcontinent.
We are talking about the region that is now Telangana.
Exactly.
It is a fascinating case study. You know, we often look at a map and just assume the borders are static or that they were inevitable. But the story of Telangana, it really, really challenges that.
It does.
It challenges the whole idea that 1947 was the finish line for Indian independence. I mean, for the people of this region, 1947 was really just the opening bell.
The start of a very long, very turbulent fight that didn't truly end until 2014.
Right.
And, scanning through the source material, the thing that immediately jumped out at me was just the sheer grandeur of the starting point. We aren't just talking about a city, we are talking about Hyderabad state.
A huge entity.
And the notes mentioned the ruler, the Nizam, had the title, His Exalted Highness. Not just Highness, Exalted Highness.
And that title wasn't just vanity. It signaled his unique status among all the princes. Hyderabad was the largest princely state in India.
I mean, what kind of scale are we talking about here?
To give you a sense, it was roughly the size of the United Kingdom. Or Italy. It had its own coinage, its own paper currency, its own postal system, even its own railway network. The Nizam commanded a 21-gun salute.
So not a minor player.
Not at all. So when the British were packing up to leave in 1947, the Nizam didn't see himself as some local governor. He saw himself as the head of a sovereign state.
Which, of course, sets the stage for a massive conflict, because you have this state within a state sitting right in the belly of the newly forming Indian Union, and it wasn't culturally uniform, was it?
No, and that is such a crucial detail for everything that happens later. It was a deeply multilingual empire. You had the ruler speaking Urdu, a massive population speaking Telugu in the Telangana region, and then significant pockets of Marathi and Kannada speakers.
A real mosaic.
It was. And in 1947, trying to fit this multilingual, semi-autonomous monarchy into a modern democratic republic was, well, difficult is an understatement.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to trace how this massive, independent-minded princely state evolved through military action, broken promises, and decades of agitation into India's youngest state.
And it is not a straight line. It is a zigzag of hunger strikes, gentlemen's agreements, and a constant redrawing of maps.
Let's start at the beginning. June 3rd, 1947. The partition plan is announced. Most princely states are scrambling to decide India or Pakistan.
But the Nizam, looking at his coins and his railways, he chooses option C.
Independence.
Independence.
Yeah.
He declared his intention to remain an independent sovereign dominion. He just refused to sign the instrument of accession to either India or Pakistan.
Geographically, though, that seems impossible. Hyderabad is landlocked. It is surrounded by India. How did he think that would work?
He was banking on his wealth, his political leverage. While everyone else was integrating, the Nizam only agreed to sign something called a standstill agreement with the Indian government.
Standstill agreement. That sounds like a diplomatic way of saying, let's just pause and see who blinks first.
That was the diplomatic veneer, yeah.
Yeah.
But the sources are very clear that behind the scenes, there was no standstill. The reality on the ground was shifting rapidly.
So he was violating it.
The Nizam's government was accused of repeatedly violating this agreement. They were engaged in clandestine arms purchases and, perhaps more provocatively, continued engagement with Pakistan.
And this is where the Razakars come into the picture, right? This wasn't just a political dispute. It got violent on the streets.
Yes, and this is the darkest chapter of that transition. The Razakars were a private militia. technically distinct from the state army, but operating with the state's tacit support.
And their job was what, exactly?
Their role was to suppress dissent against the Nizam's rule. But in practice, this meant violent targeting of the region's Hindu majority and, well, anyone who advocated for joining India.
So the situation just spiraled.
It collapsed. The law and order situation basically collapsed. You had civil unrest, communal violence, and a refugee crisis bleeding into the neighboring Indian states.
So the Indian government is watching this massive territory in its center just fall apart. Arms are coming in, a militia is terrorizing the population, and the ruler says he is independent. I assume the standstill couldn't last.
It didn't. In September 1948, the Indian government decided they had to intervene. They launched Operation Polo.
I have to pause on that name. Operation Polo. It sounds like a weekend sport, not a military invasion.
It was officially termed a police action, which is why the name sounds, a bit casual. But make no mistake, it was a full military operation. It launched on September 9th, 1948.
And the Nizam's forces?
They were no match for the Indian Army. It was incredibly swift. By September 17th, Hyderabad surrendered.
That is barely a week.
Less than 2 weeks, yes. And that date, September 17th, 1948, is the definitive end of the Asaf Jahi dynasty. The Nizam's dream of an independent dominion just evaporated.
And then what?
Hyderabad was placed under military administration for a transition period, and by 1950, when the Indian Constitution was adopted, it was classified as a Part B state.
Okay, help me out with the bureaucracy here. Part B state. Does that mean it was treated differently than, say, Bombay or Madras?
Essentially, yes. Part B states were former princely states that were now governed by a Raj Pramukh, who is usually the former ruler, under the guidance of the center.
So the Nizam was still in charge, sort of.
He was actually made the Raj Pramukh, yeah. But the key insight here is that the map hadn't changed yet. Hyderabad state still existed as this massive multilingual entity.
But the 1950s in India were all about language, right? This is when the linguistic state movement really takes off.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the catalyst for that movement actually comes from the Telugu speakers.
Right.
But not the ones in Hyderabad. It starts in the Madras presidency. There was this massive demand to carve out a state for Telugu speakers there.
And a man named Parisramulu went on a fast unto death for this cause.
Yes.
And tragically, he did die.
He did. And his death sparked such massive unrest that Prime Minister Nehru was forced to concede. In 1953, Andhra state was created on the coast.
So now you have a puzzle. You have the new Andhra state on the coast, full of Telugu speakers, and right next door you have Hyderabad state, specifically the Telangana region, which is also full of Telugu speakers.
The logic seems obvious.
Merge them, create a Vishalandhra, a greater Andhra.
That was the logic of the coastal leaders.
Yeah.
One language, one state. But, and this is the pivot point for the next 60 years of history, the people of Telangana were not sold on this idea.
Why not? I mean, if language is the unifier, what was the divider?
Economics and history. You have to remember, these two regions had been under completely different administrations for centuries. Coastal Andhra was under direct British rule.
So more developed.
Right, more developed in terms of education, irrigation, administration. Telangana had been under the Nizam's feudal rule. It's economically backward in comparison.
So the fear was that the wealthy cousins from the coast would come in and just take over.
Exactly. The fear was total domination. The people of Telangana worried that if they merged, the more educated, wealthier people from the Andhra region would swoop in, take all the government jobs, control the budget, and dominate the political landscape.
This brings us to the Mulki Rules. I see this term everywhere in the documents. It seems critical to understand this.
It is. Mulki essentially means local or native. And these weren't new rules. They dated back to the Nizam's era.
Okay.
The Mulki Rules stated that you had to be a resident of the state for a certain number of years, usually 12 or 15, to be eligible for government jobs. It was a protectionist policy.
So in the 1950s, the people of Telangana were clutching these Mulki Rules as their shield against the merger.
Yes. In fact, in 1952, there was a major agitation in Hyderabad. The slogan was, "Non-Mulki, go back." It was triggered because teachers were being brought in from the coastal districts to fill jobs in Warangal. That was the spark.
And here's the bit that often gets missed. The official body tasked with redrawing the map, the States Reorganization Commission, or SRC, they actually agreed with them.
They did. The SRC explicitly recommended that Telangana should remain a separate state known as Hyderabad State for at least 5 years, until 1961.
So they put the brakes on the merger.
They wanted to give the region time to develop democratically and economically before even considering it. They warned that a forced merger would lead to internal colonialism.
That is a massive I told you so moment in history. If the government had listened to their own commission, we might have avoided decades of strife.
Likely. But politics moves faster than administrative caution. The leaders from both sides sat down and signed what was called the Gentleman's Agreement.
Whenever I hear gentleman's agreement in a history podcast, I assume someone is about to get a bad deal.
Your instinct is correct. The agreement promised that if they merged, the Mulki Rules would be respected, the revenue from Telangana would be spent in Telangana, and there would be power sharing in the cabinet.
Empty promises.
Based on these assurances, the merger went through. On November 1st, 1956, Andhra Pradesh was born, with Hyderabad as the capital. But the gentleman didn't stay gentle for long.
So what happened?
Almost immediately, the cracks appeared. The perception in Telangana was that the safeguards were being systematically violated. Surplus revenue from Telangana was being diverted to the coast. And crucially, non-locals were being hired for jobs that were supposed to be reserved for Mulkis.
So the shield was broken.
Shattered. This brings us to 1969. This is the first major explosion of discontent. A massive student agitation erupted demanding a separate Telangana. It wasn't just a protest, it was a movement.
Right. And this led to the formation of the Telangana PrajaSamithi, or TPS.
And looking at the election results, the TPS wasn't a fringe group. They swept the polls in 1971.
They did.
They won 10 out of 14 parliamentary seats in the region. That is a clear mandate. But, and here's the twist of political maneuvering, the movement didn't result in a new state then. The TPS eventually merged into the Congress Party.
So the movement kind of got absorbed into the machine.
In a way. But the grievance didn't go away. It moved to the courts. The validity of the Mulki Rules was fought all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
In a surprise ruling, the Supreme Court actually upheld the Mulki Rules as valid.
So the locals won.
Legally, yes. But politically, it caused a huge backlash. This triggered the Jai Andhra movement in 1972. Suddenly, the people in the coastal Andhra region were furious.
Wait, so they wanted to separate now?
Exactly. They said, if we can't get jobs in our own state capital, Hyderabad, because of these rules, then we want out. We want a separate Andhra state.
That is ironic. So now both sides want a divorce. Telangana feels exploited, and Andhra feels excluded. The state must have been ungovernable.
It was chaotic. There were ministerial resignations, violence, and eventually, President's rule was imposed in 1973. The central government had to step in.
And Indira Gandhi introduces the 6-point formula to try and patch it up. What was the fix?
It was a bureaucratic workaround. Instead of statehood, they divided the state into 6 zones. The idea was to reserve 85% of government jobs and academic seats for locals within each zone.
So if you are from Zone 1, you compete for jobs in Zone 1.
Precisely. It sounds like a Band-Aid.
It does.
It was. And as part of this deal, the Mulki Rules were technically repealed because this zonal system replaced them. It brought a semblance of administrative order, but it failed to address the emotional core. The identity crisis was never solved, it was just managed.
Which explains why it didn't stay buried. Fast forward to the early 2000s. The movement wakes up again. And this time, there is a new face leading the charge.
K. Chandrasekhar Rao, known as KCR. KCR is the defining figure of this final chapter. In April 2001, he left the Telugu Desam Party and formed the Telangana PrajaSamithi. And unlike previous politicians, KCR had a single-point agenda.
Statehood or nothing.
Exactly. He revived the demand for separate Telangana with Hyderabad as its capital. And he was very effective at mobilizing not just voters, but the cultural identity of the region. Festivals, language, history. He weaponized all of it.
And it all came to a head in 2009. I remember seeing this on the news. KCR went on a fast into death.
It was a high-stakes political gamble. The tension was palpable. The region was practically shut down. The pressure became so immense that on December 9, 2009, the Union Home Minister, P. Chidambaram, actually announced that the process for forming Telangana would begin.
It sounded like victory.
For a moment. But as soon as the words left his mouth, the other side of the state, Andhra and Rayalaseema, erupted in counter-protests. MLAs resigned en masse.
So the central government got cold feet.
Immediately, they paused the process.
That must have been devastating for the Telangana movement. To be promised a state at midnight and have it taken away by morning.
It was seen as a betrayal. But looking back, that pause was actually the catalyst that made the movement unstoppable. It galvanized everyone. We aren't just talking about politicians now.
This is when it became a pickles movement.
This is where the Joint Action Committees took over. Students, government employees, lawyers, coal miners, they all went on strike. They organized the Sakala Janula Som, a general strike that lasted over 40 days.
That basically proved that the status quo was impossible to maintain.
Precisely. The cost of keeping the state united had become higher than the cost of dividing it. Democracy finally moved. The Andhra Pradesh Reorganization Act was passed in Parliament, and on June 2, 2014, the map changed.
Telangana was officially born as India's 29th state.
With KCR as the first chief minister and Hyderabad as a permanent capital, it's an incredible arc.
But the story doesn't actually stop at the border, does it? Because once they got the state, they started redrawing the map inside the state.
This is a fascinating postscript. When Telangana was formed in 2014, it consisted of 10 districts, the historic ones like Adilabad, Karimnagar, Warangal. But if you look at a map of Telangana today, it looks like a jigsaw puzzle with way more pieces.
Yeah, the notes say the number of districts tripled.
They went from 10 to 31 between 2014 and 2021.
That is aggressive rezoning. What was the logic? Was it just gerrymandering, or was there a governance reason?
The stated logic was administrative convenience and decentralization. In the old massive districts, a villager might have to travel 150 kilometers to reach the district collectorate just to file a grievance.
I see.
By breaking them down into smaller units, creating new districts like Jagtil, Siddipet, and Suryapet, the government brought the administration closer to the doorstep of the citizen.
It's almost a fractal version of the statehood struggle itself. The big state was too far away and didn't understand us, so we want a smaller state.
That's a brilliant way to put it.
The big district is too far away, so we want a smaller district.
It is the same drive for accessible power. And looking at Telangana today, despite the birthing pains, it has emerged as a politically stable and economically robust entity. It successfully transitioned from that feudal, princely past to a modern democratic state.
So if we zoom out from the Nizam trying to hold on to his kingdom, to the SRC warning about the merger, to the street fights and the final bill in Parliament, what is the big takeaway here?
I think the provocative thought for the listener is this. We often treat democracy as a set of rules or a periodic vote, but the story of Telangana shows that democracy is actually a constant, messy negotiation of identity.
It's not just about drawing lines.
No. A map isn't just geography. A map is a reflection of people's aspirations. It took 60 years, a lot of pain, and a lot of protests, but eventually the map had to bend to fit the will of the people, not the other way around.
Right.
The administrative logic of 1956 failed because it ignored the human logic of identity.
That is a powerful place to leave it. The map had to bend to fit the people. Thank you so much for walking us through this incredible history.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
It is a story that definitely deserves a deep dive.
And thank you for listening. We will catch you on the next deep dive.